Imagine you've just transferred to a new school and no one knows you. You need to change into your gym clothes for the next class, so you casually walk into the boys' changing rooms. It's cold, so you just put the gym shirt over your long sleeved shirt, but then you notice something. A group of boys are staring at you. See, of course he wouldn't take off his shirt. I told you he wouldn't actually change. She shouldn't even be in this room. I don't have to imagine that. This was my experience after transferring to a new school when I was 14 years old. I was seen as too feminine to be a real guy, and the main place of harassment? The boys' changing rooms. Despite being able to prove I was a real guy by just taking off my shirt, the discomfort of so many eyes on me made me scared to ever do that. But it made me think, so what if I was a trans man? I definitely would have felt more unsafe if that were the case. But would that really change that much about me? That was only in 2020, but what about more recent times? Surely everyone's more accepting of LGBTQ people now, right? I mean, queer representation is everywhere. Wait, you're actually gay? Why did you choose that? Does that mean if gay exists, I'm just normal? Yep, these are real questions I've gotten in the last few months. Now, I live in a very LGBTQ friendly country, Australia. We got rights for gay marriage approved almost 10 years ago in 2017. Back then, even as a child, I didn't really understand the concept of people being unable to love whoever they wanted. But here I am in 2026, thinking the same thing. Let's go back to the first recorded instances of criminalization of homosexuality. In 1290 English law, sodomy was seen as an offense against God, with the punishment being buried alive or burnt to death. So this criminalization started through religious beliefs, but what about before then? Well, actually, there were quite a few recorded documentations of same-sex couples, with the first being in 2450 BCE ancient Egypt. Now, I don't want to butcher these names, but I'll leave them on the screen. These two were buried together in a tomb with a painting depicting them kissing. Apparently, they both had wives and children, but they're often shown together holding hands, sitting together, or embracing each other in ways that are usually used to depict married couples. Many historians also interpret them to be brothers, but this is a running problem that comes up in the study of history when it comes to queer couples. There's little documented instances of homosexuality in history, but this is due to the fact that it often gets covered up. Or with the legendary phrase, they were just roommates. But no matter how much this topic has been covered up or interpreted differently, there's widely known facts on many ancient civilizations allowing homosexuality, such as in the early 8th century BC in Greece, where the lawmaker Philolord of Corinth created laws to support same-sex male unions, and by 7th century BC there were about 5 different varieties of same-sex relations. So one main point I see brought up is that homosexuality isn't natural or that it's a current trend, but obviously it's dated back centuries. The reason you see more gay people now is because we have more rights. We're not going to be executed the moment we announce or express it, except in some countries still. Gay people didn't magically appear in the late 20th century, they just got more comfortable sharing it. So, when did the LGBTQ rights movement start? It first started in 1924 by a German immigrant in America, Henry Gerber. He created a society for human rights after being sent to a mental institution due to his sexuality. In 1933, pink triangles were used to identify homosexual men in Nazi Germany concentration camps. Later in 1995, this pink triangle campaign was installed at the Dachau Memorial Museum, commemorating the suffering of homosexual men and women during the Holocaust. In 1955, the Daughters of Bilitis became the first lesbian rights organization founded in San Francisco by Dorothy Louise Taliaferro del Martin and Phyllis Leone. Now, the first gay uprising happened in LA in 1959. Police attempted to arrest 3 people in a popular gay meeting place. Transgender women started throwing donuts, coffee, and paper plates at the police, who were forced to retreat and return with reinforcement. By the time they returned, however, the resistance had grown and spread down to the main street. This was called the Cooper Donuts Riot and was followed by more well-known LGBTQ riots such as the Stonewall Inn riots in 1969. This particular riot marked the first big galvanization of LGBTQ individuals, which was followed by the first ever Pride Parade in 1970. It was the first big demonstration where people appeared openly LGBTQ in public. It marked a new beginning for self-expression and the fight for equal rights. In recent years, Pride Month has become massive, where thousands of people gather worldwide for parades and events. Why? Because we still don't have equal rights in most of the world, let alone the sheer amount of homophobia in countries that do have equal rights for LGBTQ individuals. Let's move on to queer representation in media. Mainstream media has had a lack of queer representation for the entirety of its history. This resulted in the increase of fan fiction from the 2000s until even now. The queer community has had such little representation of LGBTQ stories and characters that the only solution was to create their own. However, representation is a lot more common nowadays. Is it good? Not always. A lot of representation seems to push negative stereotypes that portray LGBTQ people as terrible and often predatory. There's also token representation, where the LGBTQ character doesn't play a big role but is there just to bring in viewers of the queer community. Queerbaiting is another type where media suggests the sexuality of a character to be queer, but never confirms nor denies it. This is also another marketing technique to bring in queer viewers. And now, no representation. This is when media portrays only straight people. This technically still counts as, well, a lack of representation, but it normalizes the idea that everyone is sexually homogenous. This suddenly made me think of that one TikTok where the woman is like, "Why is everyone gay in every show? I get you guys exist, but why are we normalizing this?" It was something like that. I think she deleted the original. But this is what the decades of oppression and lack of representation has done. Sexuality, no matter if you're gay, straight, or whatever, is normal. Having gay characters in shows is a realistic depiction of the world we live in. No one ever questioned straight people being the only ones depicted in shows. But now that a tiny percentage of media has queer representation, you have people complaining about it, as if there aren't thousands of shows without queer people represented at all. Okay, I want to talk particularly about negative representation in one specific form of media. That is BL manga, manhwa, or dramas. As a gay man, listen, I read BL as my own type of romance genre, so the differentiation between me saying I read romance or BL shouldn't be taken as a crazy topic, but it often does. Oh my god, you read BL? One of your favorite genres is BL? Damn, that's so freaky. Come on. It's the same as me saying I read romance, and usually I do say I like reading romance. But that's where the problem lies. BL as a genre is so heavily sexualized that some people I've talked to cannot genuinely comprehend that there's good stories out there that don't involve sexual activities. My particular favorites are the ones that delve into more realistic experiences of being a gay man, such as Our Youth. Please read it, it's so good. It's stories like this that kind of bring me back to the reality we live in and make me realize just how oppressed and stigmatized the LGBTQ community still is. However, You see the mainstream stories, such as Jinx, Passion, or Pearl Boy, and realize that these are some of the only stories people consume. These stereotypes end up being pushed onto real homosexual men and women. I remember I was hanging out with a group of friends a few years ago, and among them there was one girl who I wasn't close to at all. The topic of my now ex-boyfriend came up, and she literally outright asked me, "Is it like in the BL when you do it?" What? Let alone just the stereotypes of the couples usually being a big strong man and then a little helpless twink. As a smaller guy myself, these stereotypes that come from BL have literally sexualized people's perception of me as a person. Then you have stories that have good plots but involve a gay couple, making the audience solely focus on the relationship rather than the story. The best example of this I can think of is Killing Stalking. It is genuinely a good psychological thriller, but people still call it BL, as if any aspect of the story focused on the main characters being two men. A lot of queer media has basically sexualized most, if not all, aspects of gay male relationships in particular, with these relationships taking the full front of many stories they're in, such as Alien Stage, which I talked about in my previous video. Whereas LGBTQ stories for queer people gain less traction because they focus on the real lived experiences rather than over sexualized entertainment. There's a big difference between gay stories and properly queer stories for this reason. Another thing I see thrown around often is the fact that if you can headcanon and represent characters as gay, you should be able to do the same with canonically or implied gay characters and headcanon them as straight. This kind of came up in my last video about Alien Stage, and it kind of prompted me to make this video because I could not believe some of the things I was seeing in the comments. This is blatantly erasure of queer people. As I said earlier, there used to be a lack of queer representation that the LGBTQ community relied solely on fanfiction. Now that we have even a small amount of actually good representation, do people not understand the connotation of removing that? It's the whole thing of, what about straight representation? Why don't we get a month? But the whole point of pride and representation is because we've been oppressed for centuries. And now, the same people who don't have to hesitate when announcing their relationships or getting married freely are trying to take up the spaces that LGBTQ people have literally gotten killed for. Equality isn't about getting a few rights similar to the heteronormative groups and a single month to celebrate us, but then subsequently giving the same events to heteronormative people. Equality is about getting to the same level as the already privileged groups, because they've already had this. They don't need to celebrate the attainment of rights, as they've had these rights their whole lives. Now, I know some people didn't like my tone in my last video, but I'm sorry. Like, I will only be talking about topics I'm passionate about. So if I get a bit emotional or angry or, you know, a bit biased, oh my god, God forbid I'm biased in my own videos. I'm sorry. I can't really help it on topics I'm passionate about and have real lived experiences with. People who say they're sick of queer representation because we already have so much or that we aren't oppressed are blatantly ignoring the fact that so much of our representation is stereotyped or overly sexualized and that we still are oppressed. Oppression doesn't just disappear when same-sex marriage becomes legal. There's queer people living in free countries that get assaulted or even murdered just because of their gender expression or sexual orientation. Even in America, Donald Trump described social transitioning, not physical, medical, or anything, just social transitioning, as child abuse. Last year in his joint speech to Congress on March the 4th, he basically wanted to legally reintroduce conversion therapy. This idea that sexuality or gender expression is an active choice we can easily change is still widespread. Now, gender expression technically is an active choice. However, the place it comes from isn't a choice. It's the discomfort you feel in the social constructs of gender, and in many cases, the discomfort of being in the body you're born with. A related topic that's pushed is the idea of detransitioning among trans people being high, when in reality, most studies find 1% or less who detransition or regret the transition in the first place. The idea of God creating you a certain way is just so outlandish. Not everyone believes in God or any religion for that matter. One big thing I'll never understand is how being gay, trans, or just any part of the LGBTQ community affects anyone else. It's a method of fearmongering and dividing us as people. It creates a common enemy to avert the focus onto an already oppressed group and oppressing them even further. I get it though. There's crimes committed by gay people, trans people, whatever, but how are you going to villainize an entire group and ignore the fact that they commit such a small percentage of crimes? So many people are blindsided by individuals' identities and apply a negative stereotype to their entire community rather than focusing on the rest of the 99% of crimes done by straight white men. In the first place, when you're speaking about crimes, the demographic of the perpetrator shouldn't matter as much as the well being of the victims. And in a lot of cases, the victims are part of the LGBTQ community, but that doesn't get attention. Now, I just wanted to get more on the personal and emotional side of this. Why can't we love? If the people in a relationship are two consenting adults, why does it matter? Recently, I cut off my family due to years of arguing about who I am as a person. It hurts, but I thought that maybe this loneliness was needed for me to be free. That doesn't necessarily make me happy about the decision. It genuinely hurts me to consume an actually good piece of queer media because usually the reason why it's good is because it highlights the struggles of being queer in real life. Whenever I read or watch something where somehow everyone is accepting and being gay is normal, I just get this feeling of not jealousy per se, but almost hatred towards this world we live in. This video was supposed to come out months ago, but I've been way too busy. But in this time, a new show came out called Ticket to Heaven, and it's about two gay men, and religion plays a big part in the show. I'm not done with the show, but I'm through most of it, and I've had to stop watching each episode, like just in the middle of it, and just think about how real this is. I didn't really grow up, well, I did grow up religious, but not like too strict. Not in a religion that kind of condemned lust and homosexuality, but definitely, a similar situation where it was condemned within my family. But just seeing this made me think this is so real. This happens even though the representation of this sin was shown to be decades ago in the show, at least. But it's still happening to this day. People are still treating homosexuality as a sin. And seeing other people who've watched this show, they've shared their experiences of growing up, going to church, but having to fight their identities, having to hide themselves, not just from others, but from themselves, having to run away from themselves. I think shows like this are very important to depict how we feel, how the world around us makes us feel like we're not normal, that some of us end up hiding it for so long, that we believe we won't be going to heaven, that we believe we're sinners, and that we're wrong, even if we live our whole lives doing good deeds. Just this one part of ourselves can make us feel this way. Yeah, I just feel like representation like that, I wish was more mainstream. Luckily, shows like this are getting more attention, but it's just, I don't know if it's enough. If the queer representation we have now was enough, we wouldn't still be fighting for rights. Even the people who can't do the bare minimum of respecting someone's preferred pronouns make it out to be such an important aspect of their own lives. When it doesn't take much to respect how someone expresses themselves, especially when you can do it with gender conforming people all the time. Even the other day, a coworker asked me, "You're not actually gay. I know you're not gay, 100% sure. How do you know that?" "Oh, but you don't sound or act gay. Why is that?" This is what queer representation has done. People think we'll all be the same as each other, when in reality, we're all human. We're all going to have different interests, different styles, ways of speaking, and preferences. I'm not just a gay man, I'm a guy who happens to be gay. But the importance of having pride in that and not hiding it from everyone is what many LGBTQ people have died fighting for. I shouldn't be afraid of saying it when it's an inherent part of who I am. I'm sick of being asked stupid questions like, "Have you tried being with a girl? Why'd you choose to be gay?" It's never this simple. It's the same reason why being with someone of the same sex doesn't cross a straight person's mind at all. They're all just born knowing it. It's also okay to be curious and experiment. That's a normal part of discovering yourself. And it's okay to be born different from the majority as well.